This is District Ranger Jake Strohmeyer with Boise National Forest Water Quality Programs. Jake, take it away.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to cover kind of a general overview today of the activities on the Boise National Forest that are pertinent to this discussion, in the area surrounding Cascade Reservoir. So the Cascade Ranger District of the Boise National Forest has, a fair amount of land on both the east and west sides of Long Valley that drain into Cascade Reservoir and a portion of the North Fork of the Payette River. A lot of our work at this point in time is really focused on vegetation management type of work with the goal of improving forest health and ultimately hoping to reduce the risk of uncharacteristic wildfire. As David talked about at the beginning of this, there's a lot of the watershed that's been affected by large wildfires over the years, and that's one of our goals is to do the best that we can to try to reduce that risk of that continuing to happen, especially in the front country of the valley. So one of the projects that we have that we made a decision on to start implementing about a year and a half ago is called the French Hazard Project, and this is on West Mountain, basically from Willow Creek on the south up to Gibson Creek on the north. It has about 4,600 acres of planned treatments that we're going to do, which range from commercial timber sales to non-commercial thinning, prescribed fire, and mastication of fuels as well, especially along the private land boundary. One of the things that we always look at when we're planning on these sorts of large projects is looking at the amount of sediment that the activities are likely to produce. One of the things that one of our biggest contributors to sediment into the streams is often our road network that we have on the forest. So that's one of the things with this French Hazard Project that we really focused on, was taking a look at the road system there, deciding what we needed for the future, deciding what we didn't need for the future, and then also looking at improvements to the existing road network. So the French Hazard Project, along with all the vegetation management, will have a number of road improvements on a lot of the secondary roads, including some graveling in places to help reduce sediment off the roadbed. A lot of culvert replacements, and then also we have about 4 miles of road decommissioning in that area. There were 4 miles of road that we identified as being no longer needed for future management, that we plan on decommissioning after we use them to do some of the management activities there. So that's the main one that we have that directly affects Cascade Reservoir in the plan. We're also doing quite a bit of other stuff around the Long Valley area. In the Clear Creek drainage, we've got a couple more projects planned in the Clear Creek drainage, as well as another project just south of Cascade Reservoir in the Fawn Creek area, which is in response to a large outbreak of tussock moth that we've had over the last couple of years, trying to clean some of that stuff up. The area in Long Valley is actually part of two nationally significant initiatives that the Forest Service is working on. The first one is shared stewardship, and portions of the Payette and Boise National Forest make up the southern Idaho priority area for the shared stewardship program. And what that's really focused on is trying to coordinate activities that are happening on federal lands with activities that are happening on state and private timberlands. We're currently working with Tamarack Resort to do some fuels treatment around the resort area. It'll be happening on both the private land and the Forest Service land around Tamarack. The other big program that's focused around the Long Valley area is the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program. Just a couple of months ago, the Boise and Payette National Forests were selected for a new project that takes in pretty much all of the Cascade Ranger District, part of the Emmett Ranger District on the south, and then quite a bit of the southern Payette National Forest. Like shared stewardship, that program does have a big emphasis on vegetation treatments, but it also has a focus on watershed restoration as well. And the nice thing is that program comes along with some funding between the two forests. Once we start getting funded, we're hoping to bring in an additional $4 million a year that we can use to help fund the projects that we're planning, and frees up some money to do some more, watershed focused work. And so we'll be continuing to look for opportunities to do some of that work within the drainage. The next program I want to talk about is range. I know that the livestock management around the watershed is an important issue that plays into all this. And so the Cascade Ranger District has really only one range allotment that directly influences the Cascade Reservoir area or the North Fork of the Payette, or at least the upper North Fork of the Payette, and that's called the Cascade Reservoir allotment. That goes basically from the south end of the reservoir down by Campbell Creek, also up towards Gibson Creek. The allotment's been around for a long time. I don't know how long. I mean, I'm sure cows have been grazing on that ground since before the National Forest was established. However, back in the 90s, in response to a lot of the efforts going around Cascade Reservoir, the numbers and the amount of time that that permittee is allowed to graze along Cascade Reservoir was cut back significantly. It's actually the most highly managed and monitored range allotment that we have on the Boise National Forest. A very intensive pasture rotation. They're moving those cows on an average of every 2 weeks between different pastures. And then the permittee does maintain an electric fence along the reservoir to help keep cows away from the reservoir itself. Generally, they're pretty successful in doing that. Over the last couple of years, there's actually been a lot of wolf depredations on that permittee's herd that has moved the cows to places where they weren't supposed to be from time and time again. But like I said, those cows have somebody watching them all the time, and they do a pretty good job of getting them back where they're supposed to be. There's actually on the southern end of that allotment, they're only actually permitted on there for 3 weeks out of the year, from late June to middle of July, and then the north end they run from the 1st of July till the middle of September. But that's with only about 80 pairs of cows on the north end of the allotment. So there's not a lot of cows on that portion of the reservoir. We also have some other cows on the Indian Creek allotment that is an allotment that's managed by the Payette National Forest, that generally speaking stay up and over on West Mountain, but we do get some coming down, and some of the work that Bureau of Reclamation is doing with fencing and some of that will help stop some of that drift and getting some of the cows down into the reservoir. And then the last thing that I want to touch on, that's a major management issue for the Forest Service, is just the huge increase in recreation that we've seen over the past several years, especially this past summer. With the growth of the Treasure Valley, and this is no surprise to anyone on this conference, I'm sure, but we just saw a huge increase in people over the last couple of years, and then especially in response to COVID and people just their patterns of life being disrupted. A lot more activity on the forest in general, but also around Cascade Reservoir. We have 3 developed campgrounds on the west side of the reservoir that are basically booked to capacity during the whole during our whole reservation season. It's really hard to get they're booked. Those campsites are booked 6 months in advance. And so what we're starting to see is folks are having a harder time finding a place to camp, and so there's more dispersed camping going along the edge of the reservoir, and people ended up in places where we haven't typically had folks camping And so issues with, issues with human waste and other soil impacts and that sort of thing that we're looking to try to get a handle on. But it's not a challenge that I see going away anytime soon, and it may push us toward looking at some more intensive management of the recreationists along the west side of the reservoir that we manage. So, like I said, overall, I just wanted to kind of give this overview of the work that we have going on around. John Dixon from the Payette National Forest in the second session of this conference will be given a more detailed kind of technical look at what our watershed conditions and opportunities that we have to help improve watershed health. So that's all I have for you today, and thanks for having me on. I can put my contact information in the Q&A if anyone's interested in getting a hold of me or has any questions for me. Thanks.
Jake, thank you very much.